Hey, my name is Fats. Welcome to my corner of the internet. I have my microphone out, meaning that I'm here to sit down and run my mouth. But today's topic, today's reason that I'm chatting is not so much something that I've researched. I haven't put in any research at all. This is just me wanting to talk about the series that I've been interested in, series that I'm no longer interested in, authors that I'm excited about, possibly things that might be coming up in the next year that I do want to keep my eye out for. This is genuinely just one of those. I needed to round up the messiness that are my reading habits and check in with the series that I'm in. This video did come from, of course, you know me, a place of dissatisfaction. But I do want to say that I think my dissatisfaction when it comes to series is very actively my fault. And as I work through these series, tell you why I might continue, tell you what I liked, didn't like, what I'm looking for, I will, of course, I'll definitely tell you how I'm going to rectify this dissatisfaction. I have been sitting back, and of course, if you're a book reader, I think at the end of the year, so much of us are excited for what is going to come in the next year, what's coming out, what we want to continue, the habits and trends that we want to foster, and a lot of my own personal reading habits are grounded in the conversation that we're about to have. So, let's start this discussion with the series that I have participated in, the series that I have started, and I will not be continuing. I will not be going forward with for different reasons upon themselves. I, of course, will be telling you these reasons, but we're going to start there. We're going to start with the negative, and then we're going to work our way into the positive. The first series that I will not be continuing with is the Gods Beyond Sky series by Molly Chang. This series was the one that swept through BookTube as a colonizer romance. Everybody was reading it. Everybody was just upset about it. I personally don't see this as a colonizer romance. I do think that whole discussion was a little meh. If you read it and you get into it, it's more of a abusive relationship, the manipulative nature of a partner, and the way that you can be gaslit into loving somebody. That was the relationship. I think the concept of a colonizer romance, people just see these affects as one-dimensional. Anyways, this story comes into a magical world where the magic users are losing their magic, or they no longer have that magic. Our FMC has the power of death. She is able to take the life from somebody or give them death. She pulls the life out of them. Now, due to this power, she is a force to be reckoned with. And due to the fact that her power can kill somebody and leave no fingerprints, no traces, of course the colonizers that be want to use that power to their benefit. She gets intermixed into all of that, whatever. I will not be continuing this one because it was the modern thing that I personally get annoyed with, where I feel like a story is dragged along and not much happens, and then a whole lot happens in the last few chapters to drag you into the next book. The way a lot of these books are written feels like a money grab to try to get you into the next one, and I'm really just not interested in those types of books. I won't be continuing with that one. That's just a pet peeve of mine. Did it have twists where I was like, oh my goodness, I wonder what's going to happen? Yeah, but the fact that I was dragged through this story and I didn't feel like you authentically wrote a tale was a little bit annoying to me. So not really interested in that one. The world was great. I did enjoy the magic system. I did enjoy this, the way it was built and the way the story was built. I did enjoy the lore. I don't know. A lot of my I won't be continuing rests in this idea that there are so many good books in the world, and I just if it doesn't grab me and I'm not fully invested, I'm not gonna bring myself to come back into that world. And this one was one. Did I have questions? Of course. The author purposely left crazy holes at the end. Of course I have questions, but questions in a way where I was given a hole and I would like to fill it. Not so much I am invested in the continuance of what these characters were doing. Won't be continuing it. The other series that I started was The Legends of Thezmarr by Helen Scheurer. This one was a story of a woman who wants to join this guardian force, but it's not allowed for women to wield blades. She has this super sexy relationship with the man who is forced to kind of be her chaperone. I, once again, just didn't really care about all the holes left at the end of this one. I also didn't enjoy this male character. The degree of objectification that was occurring on his side of things when we were in his mind was annoying to me. The concept of romance wasn't in here. The blatant sexualization of this character. I also felt weird about this relationship because the FMC was written like an insipid child. She was childish. It was almost infantile how just stupid her thought processes continued forward. So for me to try to rectify that, we had this woman that felt 13 and rectify that this 13-year-old mind is a 24-year-old woman, and then this grown man wants to tap that aggressively. I just really couldn't. It was just not making sense for us to have this grown, broody guy, and then for me to then be in her mind and be like, are you an infant? Something about that felt weird. I wasn't comfortable with it. I do know she's of age. I do know that. But to exist in her mind and then make that sexual, I was like, you're dumb and annoying. I really can't be here. So, not continuing that book. I did enjoy the action scenes. I enjoyed the friendships. And I do think it will continue in an exciting way. You just have to like this FMC more than I did. Or another thing that I think can bring this series forward is if the author writes some character growth in this person, which can happen. That's a good reason for a series, essentially. Like, being able to write a character and grow with them, this character needs some growth, which you could get. I was just so tired of her in this first one that I don't even care about her growth. I don't. So, not continuing that one. I will not continuing the Summoner Circle by S.T. Gibson. This series did start with Evocation. This story centers around a polyamorous relationship, right? Amongst witches, warlocks, magical people, summoning circles, all of that, right? But the way that the center of the story was written with this polyamorous relationship, I could not see why these people cared for each other. Again, there is an opportunity for this author to better flesh out these relationships, better flesh out the attraction. But it really felt like this yearning for toxicity, almost. I just couldn't stand by a good portion of what these characters were doing. I don't know. It was annoying to me. I don't care for it. And since the magic elements of this series and the actual summoning and ghosts and demons type of thing was almost sidelined to this polyamorous relationship, which wasn't even polyamorous at the end of the day. There was two characters who were in a relationship, and then you had a toxic ex, and character number 2 was just constantly drawn back to their toxic ex, and then this character just was like, I know you're always gonna go back to him, so I just have to accept that. If I love you, I have to accept that you're gonna go back to him. That's not polyamorous. That's toxic. That's really unfair to that first character. And I love the first character, the one who just has to accept that her partner really, really, really wants his toxic ex. She deserves better. She really does. Also, there was like some spice thrown in that felt really out of place. I don't know. We all know I'll read some spice, but this just felt oddly out of place. It didn't quite flow with what I felt in this story. It just felt very disjointed. And also with the fact of the actual magic being so in the background, I don't know why I would be in the second book. If I'm going to be honest, I don't see why we need more. Unless, again, I'm invested in this relationship and we're just going to get more of the relationship. Then it's just a romance series where I see these people eventually fall in love. Even though they're apparently in love, but it's actually just toxic. Won't be continuing that series. There are better books in the world. I will not be continuing. I don't think. Okay. There is a chance that I will continue the Ice Planet Barbarian series. There is a chance. It is a silly, goofy time, and I'm not going to explain myself. I don't think I'll continue. However, it is a silly, goofy time. I might be back there. I might dive back into it. I don't know, though. I'm not entering my future like, oh, I need some more Ice Planet Barbarians. It's not what I'm feeling. However, if I get a yearning for a silly, goofy time, I will be back there. I will. They're short. They're quick. They pack a little bit of a sexy little bunch. And there is a hilarity to these stories. There is a ridiculousness to these stories. That's just silly, goofy, and naked. The next couple of series that I'm not going to continue, I actually entered this past season thinking that I wanted to go forward. And I was thinking about going forward in them in more of a office mindset. Because if you've met anybody who really loves The Office, they always tell you the first season isn't as good. It gets better as you go. Now, the next couple of books, I read them in the midst of the hype. I read them when everybody else was reading them, and everybody was so excited about them. They didn't hit for me. But I was telling myself that maybe it's because the author is new to writing, haven't really gotten their toes into this world. Maybe they just need to dip their toes in and it'll get better as they go. I also really was curious as to why so many people were here for the first book, hyped it up, and then I never saw anybody talk about the next books. I was curious more in a why is nobody talking about the second book stance. Not so much I'm curious about the books themselves. I won't be continuing these series because I just couldn't bring myself to read them. Do you have books in your home that you're like, I have them, I'm not exactly excited? That's how I felt about these. One of them is the Powerless series by Lauren Roberts. This is going to be a trilogy? I don't know. It is quite literally Hunger Games fanfiction. Through and through. If you like the Hunger Games, you might like Powerless. It does all of those bits. And I think I enjoyed the first book because it felt like fanfiction. I was not in it in like a this is a book mindset. I was more in it in like a, oh, this is the Hunger Games, and we added a different little spice. We gave them some powers. That's all I felt. But I then read the novella, and the dialogue was so poorly written, and I also got frustrated because in the first book, there is the death of a character, and it didn't hit me. I didn't care about the death of that character. The novella, you actually get to know the character, and then that death actually hit a little bit harder. I am so uninterested in a story that needs 120 separate pages in order to make me feel something for a major event in a 400-page book. if you had 400 pages and you could not make me care, and you added 120 pages to that, and that's what made me care. At that point, it kind of annoyed me. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I'm glad. Thank you so much for adding in this piece to give me the emotions that I needed. But the dialogue was a little annoying. The romance didn't make any sense. It was, of course, it's a novella, so it didn't feel like it was properly fleshed out. And then to be given the gaps that I didn't have from the first book, I do think novellas do a lot when you have them like almost tangential to the first book. But this one was tangential in a way that did the work that the first book didn't do. It didn't add. It did work that should have been there in the first place. If I didn't have emotions, that's lacking. That's a problem. It's an issue. Won't be continuing that one. The final book that I have on my list of book series that I started this past year and will not be continuing, the Letters of Enchantment series. Now, I am so loud about how I think BookTube, like my conspiracy theory with BookTube is major booktubers are paid to like certain books. Because this Letters of Enchantment series, I haven't heard anybody, not a single person, talk about the second book. However, the first book made it onto everyone's best books of 2023 list. Everyone's. Every single major booktuber who reads fantasy put Divine Rivals on their favorites list, and none of them have talked to me or talked about the second book. And I was gonna continue it. I was. The FOMO of everybody loving it so much was what was going to push me forward. But there was something in this first book that led to my disinterest, right? So, as you know, this is a story, two rival journalists strike up a flirtation because they have some enchanted typewriters so they can communicate with one another. When you tell me our romance is going to get built in the form of letter writing, I am ready for poetic to be waxed. I am ready for turns of phrase that rip my heart out and sew patches on it. I was so ready for this letter writing story, but the letters themselves just felt like text messages. And then another thing was, there was this incongruous nature in which the lore was built for the story, but the world itself wasn't built. I was taken on this train, and then I was taken to the battle, but also the train to the battle wasn't that far, but this fight felt really far away from the town. I'm unsure. The way this world was built, the way things were spaced, it didn't quite fit. However, the lore was given a lot of attention. It was really difficult to try to patch those together and be a part of the present day when I didn't understand the spacing in the land that we were in, what the temperature, the environment that we were in, the way that not much was built in the present was it was very discombobulating almost. Not crazy about it. Now, let's talk about series that I have started and I will continue with. They're not necessarily priorities, but they are things that you will most likely see from me in the future. First, what I think at this second I'm going to label as my top series so far of the year. There's only one more month of this year. I don't know what sort of crazy reading I'm going to be doing, but the Southern Reach series by Jeff Vandermeer. This falls into the horror, sci-fi, speculative, literary horror genre. Now, I loved this series. I thought it was well put together, well structured, and I also loved how Vandermeer seemed to have fun with how he put together this story. Let me explain what I mean by that. The first book, which is everybody's favorite book, has this sort of lush, hypnotic, the words themselves felt mossy and suffocating and surreal. There was this very pervasive feeling to the first book. This pending anxiety and the vining nature of the words just kind of encroaching and taking over was so great. And I just want to emphasize the lushness of this first book. So well done. It really, really sits with that feeling of it being a horror. It also really fleshes out the sci-fi elements of things, I think, the best. The second book is slower, so much slower. If you liked what happened in the first book, the second book might upset you. However, let me advocate for my man Vandermeer. The second book felt more dysfunctional, sterile, and it weaves in a different aspect of that pervasiveness, I think, in the best kind of way. So you go from Area X. You're existing within this enigmatic Area X in the first book. The second book, you're in this dilapidated government bureaucratic system that is the mind behind the ventures into Area X. So you get those sterile feelings and you get that bureaucratic nature and you get that pervasiveness, but more so in a completely different setting. That lushness disappears. The surrealism disappears and it gets grounded into something more concrete, I would say, which is a very opposite feeling from the first book, which I do think is so intentional because a major player in an Area X sanctioned off by the government sending bodies in is the governing bureaucratic body itself. So I do think it is intentional to understand that. Then you get to the third book. And the third book, again, I just want to keep saying pervasive because it, again, brings in this pervasive feeling with a second person narration that is woven in there in such a disconcerting way, but very experimental. I do think the third book brings in this literary aspect and this surrealist aspect while also struggling to combine the lush surrealism I got in the first book and the sterile concreteness I got in the second book. The third interweaves in a way that doesn't quite work. Again, I want to say that feels intentional. When the form and content of what Vandermeer is writing mirror each other perfectly. For people to say the second book was so slow and empty, and it's about a governing body. And the first book to feel intangible and you're within Area X. And for the third book to feel incongruous. And you're bringing in these elements of the second into this surrealistic entity. Felt almost purposefully contradictory. It felt very purposefully at odds. It didn't quite fit together in a way that was an easy read. It was difficult to get through the third one, but it was difficult due to the form of what I was reading, I think. I'm continuing this because after 10 years, Vandermeer wrote a 4th book. And this 4th book is a prequel to the other 3. I refuse to read a summary of or look into this 4th book at all. I want to go into this one with no understanding of why he did it, what he's doing. I'll look into what Vandermeer had to say about why he wrote it later. Right now, I just want to go into it. Just raw. Like, you know, I'm just so excited about that. Another series that I'm really excited about continuing is the Deep Water series by Emma Hamm. This is monster romance. But let me explain. First of all, the covers, beautiful. These covers are so beautiful. I then want to say, what's the YouTube safe term that we're going to use this time? Utensil, I think, is the one I usually use. The tool. This mermaid. These mermaids have when you read monster romance, right? Not all of them really have a plot. You're just there. And you don't see nothing wrong with a little bit of bump and grind. That's what you get. The Deepwater series actually did have a plot, which was mind-boggling to me, because ain't no way you got me in here with a plot and then you bust out I'll be back. So this past year I did start another series, the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. And I was not prepared for how much I was going to enjoy that one, because this one follows a shape-shifting walker, Mercedes, who is a Volkswagen mechanic who happens to live next door to the local alpha pack leader, Adam. It is an urban fantasy. It is a slow burn romance where we don't get any aspect of romance in the first book. Adam and Mercy are getting to know each other. It's cute. It's amazing. This is kind of one of those comfort series, I think, because again, plot. There was plot. There was world. There were characters. And it's fun because Mercy is this Volkswagen mechanic who's working on this Scooby mobile for her bestie, the vampire. And it's a lot of fun. You get all of the werewolves that are in Adam's pack, and he has a daughter, and there's quite a lot built. Again, it is an urban fantasy, so you're just kind of in the real world. I will be back to it, I think. I enjoyed the first. I just did feel a little overwhelmed knowing that there's like 50 books in this series, so you just get to hang out with them, which feels very comforting. Like, let me see what Mercy's getting into. I know there's another book that I can go into. Possibly. I don't know. I had a good time, so if I was sitting around and I had nothing to listen to, I think I would audiobook the next few books and just kind of hang out. Kind of like a checking back in on a friend kind of feeling. Not so much I need to know what is happening, but more of I miss Mercy and let me get something easy. I don't know. I then listened to The Bone Witch. The audiobook of The Bone Witch was so perfect. So I don't know if I enjoyed the writing or if the audiobook reader really did her thing. I'm sorry, I don't know. So I don't even know. So if you've read the book and you're like, what are you talking about? It was trash. The audiobook went hard. It really went hard. If you hated reading it, maybe listen to the audiobook. This is a story within a story because a bard comes upon a bone witch who is exiled, and she tells him the story of why she is exiled. This entire story begins with her as a young girl at the funeral of her brother. And as she is mourning and crying at his grave, she resurrects him, discovers that she's a bone witch. Now, power in this world, power within the Asha world, is kind of feared, especially the bone witches. Now, the middle of this book was pretty slow because all you're getting is an understanding of this Asha world, and you're getting a lot of world and magic building, lore building. This first book felt like it was intended to build an understanding so that you can get plot later. The only reason, again, I'm not so mad at that is it is a story within a story. This bard came to our main character and said, what brought you here? And she's giving you her background. That is essentially a slow world building effort. So felt intentional, not mad at it. I would like to see where she goes. I do enjoy these characters. The resurrected brother, our bone witch. And I care about the world in a way that I would like to go back to it. We'll be continuing that one. That is a 3-part series, 3 books in that one. I started the first book, I finished the first book of The Villains and Virtues by A.K. Caggiano, which is a story of Damien, the Dark Lord Prince, who makes an intense spell to enthrall and make essentially a slave of his greatest enemy at the time, right? And a silly little bubbly blonde tries to pickpocket Damien, and she accidentally gets this spell on her. Damien knows that one of the only ways to get this spell back, because again, he took forever to use this for his greatest enemy. He kind of needs a spell. He can't just make it again. Is he could kill the bubbly blonde. But for some reason, he doesn't want to, which is crazy because he understands himself as this evil guy. So why wouldn't he just kill this woman? So then they just go on a silly little adventure together. And this is hilarious. I love this one because of the characters you meet along the way on this silly little adventure and this silly little track is laugh out loud funny. It was laugh out loud funny. This is another slow burn romance. There is no kissing in this first book because Damien is a man that really values consent. Mind you, he did accidentally put the spell on this woman, and he doesn't want her to kiss him because he tells her to, or she feels like she has no other choice. Love that for us. I will be back for this one. Again, love the covers. I haven't laughed out loud to many books, and this one really got me, so I want to come back to that. The author's sense of humor really just sits with mine. As you know, it hit my favorites, The Dance of Thieves duology by Mary E. Pearson. I have hyped up this book in a favorites video at length. I will link it up in the cards. I actively have the second book in my home. Fingers crossed that second book makes it to my next favorites video. I started the Broken Blades series. This one is by my Corland, and it is about the coming together, the calling to of 5 very intense killers, people who are the most dangerous of the most dangerous, called together to kill the God King, right? Now, I do have some qualms with this book. I genuinely have some qualms. First, let me tell you about these 5 killers. You have a hitman, you have a hitman with like a dark past. You have an assassin, a bandit prince, a thief, and a spy. am a bit on the fence with continuing this one just because of a few things that kind of annoyed me. One, you have these 5 best of the best killers, but I didn't really get much to them where it made sense for them to be here, right? To kill the God King, you need the best of the best. However, there were 2 additions that I'm just like, okay, I need their history. I need their past. I need a bit more. Why were you chosen? When you get to the end, you're like, oh, that's why. These are what these people are here for. The twist felt almost Scooby-Doo-esque, like a ha-ha reveal at the end that was a little unsatisfying. However, it does have my curiosity piqued. I feel manipulated because even though I feel like I should have seen this twist coming, my interest is piqued. It is. I also, the assassin that I told you about, I am deeply interested in her character. Deeply. The other ones, I don't care. The assassin, I'm deeply interested in. I'm even interested in her romance. She is almost carrying this book for me. Loved her. I have started the Indian Lake Trilogy by Stephen Graham Jones. I will be going on with that one because I want to understand the hype of the trilogy, and I enjoyed this narrative voice of our on the outs high schooler who just really likes horror and are just absolutely unhinged, like narrative voice. She was a lot of fun. Reading in that mind, it was something different. I would continue it. Also, this, like I said, the entire series is really hyped. So no matter if I like the second book or hate the second book, I am going to do all of them just because my curiosity is the whole thing at this point. I started the Folk of Air series. Now, I found a visual that I'm going to put up that shows how all of these books are intermingled in this world. And this is part of the reason why I started this one, because I was hearing hype about the Stolen Air series. Duology, trilogy, don't know. Stolen Air. I was hearing hype about it. And I heard that it was set in the same world as the Cruel Prince series, which has an insane amount of a cult following. I am having a great time for a couple of reasons. The Fae. I haven't read Fae that I really, really enjoy for a minute. And I love the Fae. I've read the first book and I read the novella. The novella is a look into Terran's side of the story, which I love. Do you remember earlier when I was talking about how annoyed I was at the way that the Powerless series added a novella? This one added the novella in a way that I needed, because I wanted to backhand Terran. I wanted to give her a people's elbow, but getting her novella added depth to her, and it helped me not want to lay my hands on her as much. So that was really enjoyable to me, getting her novella. I have the second and third book on hold at the library, so I'm hoping in my winter stack we've got those books on my next TBR. The last series. Now, again, I don't know, but I might continue this one for one reason only. So the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, right? I just like dragons. That's it. That's all. I wasn't mind blown by the Fourth Wing book. I just love dragons. That's my favorite of the mythical creatures. If there is a dragon in it, there is a large chance that you're going to see me there just for that. Those are all the series I'm in the middle of. Now, I want to talk about my goals going forward, what I'm looking for, what has excited me, and something that I think I noticed about myself, actually. And what I think I've been saying in Now, with all of these ones that I'm not continuing or I'm not interested in, I notice that they all have something similar. Two things similar. One, the world building was subpar at best. And two, I didn't really care for my characters. Now, going into 2025, I realized one other thing, that didn't hit me until I started preparing for a different video. I'm preparing a Goodreads Choice Awards type of thing of my own volition. But with that, I was thinking about what is the best villain that I read this year. And I couldn't tell you one. I couldn't tell you a single one. I'm preparing the notes and looking back and trying to prepare information so that I can do a good talking video of my favorites. And I don't have a singular villain that has stood out to me, which is wild. I'm reading all of this fantasy and I'm reading all of these intense magical books, but the concept of a villain, of an opposing force, was not something that excited me in any of these books. Even the ones that I want to continue, they're better. But of all of them, I can't tell you anything. Yeah, even the Dance of Thieves didn't really have a villain. Indian Lake is like a horror. There's scary stuff happening. But the concept of getting a well fleshed out villain, I haven't had that in ages. You know, the last time I think I had a good villain experience, which I hate to say it, was the Scythe series. 2 years ago. I read that 2 years ago. But otherwise, I'm looking at the books around my house and I'm thinking about the books that I read, and this aspect of a villain that is flawed, a villain that has depth, versus I've read a lot of stories where it's there's this kind of evil place with evil people that are bad. A villain isn't just bad. A villain has motivations. A villain has depth. A villain has wants. A villain has dreams. A villain has goals. I haven't gotten that in ages. I also haven't gotten world building that I was excited about, and I haven't gotten a magic system that I've been excited about. All of these things I've been sitting back, and when it comes to continuing a series isn't just about the plot. And I feel like a lot of books that I've read recently and a lot of new releases that I've read in the past couple of years, a lot of authors are let me throw in a little plot twist. I personally am continuing series because of the main character, the depth of this world, and I want to return to the world. Another villain that I would say is written in an interesting way is what's the series that came out before Six of Crows? Do you know what I'm talking about? I'll put it on the screen when I remember what it is. That was an interesting villain. I'm not getting those from the recent books that I'm reading. Summoner Circle, not really a villain, it's just kind of a romance thing. Ice Planet Barbarians. Powerless. You've kind of just got a bad government thing. The Molly Chang, you kind of have this colonizing force kind of thing that we're kind of inside. The Legends of Thezmarr, you have this wall and these kind of evil stuff happening on the other side of the wall. The concept of a bad guy written well is not something that I'm getting anymore, and I miss it. I read a lot of romantasy books. Romantasy is not going to have a villain. They're not going to have a villain. You have a lot of plot dedicated towards a goal that the main character has. I think a lot of books I'm reading are main character pushed and plot pushed, but the concept of a villain is something that I want so desperately going forward. I want a world that I'm excited about. I want characters that I'm excited about. I want depth. Now, in my frustrations and in me looking through all of this and wanting all of this depth, I had to come to a conclusion. I think my dissatisfaction isn't the books. I think my dissatisfaction is from the fact that I'm expecting more from a genre that isn't intended to do that. And I think I'm just not in the right genre. So my goal going forward is starting now, starting next month, starting in a few, starting 2025. A big goal of mine is epic high fantasy. I think I'm ready. I am a bit intimidated by epic high fantasy because romantasy, all of these fantasy books that I read are very brain off fantasy. Epic high fantasy is very brain on, but what intimidates me about the epic high fantasy is what I'm frustrated about not getting in these romantasy and fantasy. And I think I need to hit a point where I'm like, oh, I'm just, you know how you're dating somebody and they ain't never been romantic and they've never done cool, cute stuff for you and they've never been that person and you're just mad that they don't think about you and get you flowers like they're supposed to. That's that thing of like expecting something from a person or thing or space that just doesn't do it and trying to change this category of person. I need to break up with that person. Rather than asking them for flowers, I need to get me somebody who wants to buy me flowers, who wants to get me chocolates, who wants to take me on dates. That's epic high fantasy. I need to break up with the person that isn't satisfying me. I need to break up with the person who isn't breaking my back the way that they should and thinking that, oh, I can just teach them about what pleasure I want. No, I'm not teaching you how to pleasure me. All these people in the world, and I'm just going to keep going back to the same ones thinking that I'm going to get something better. No. I'm not going to stop reading fantasy, don't get me wrong. I'm still going to hit up my toxic ex on a WYD. I am. However, I am going to explore epic high fantasy next year. Coming up. It is going to influence the next TBR that you see from me 100%. Next TBR you see from me is going to be heavily influenced by the fact that I want escapism with depth. And I want a good villain so badly. If you've made it this far in the video, please tell me your favorite villain. Please tell me if you've had a good villain. And, recommend them below. I'm already building out my winter TBR, but your villain recommendations, your fantasy recommendations below, I'll take note of them. They'll show up in a different TBR. I always take note of your guys' recommendations. But specifically, tell me about a villain. Tell me about a villain that sat with you. A villain that you think really pushed a story forward. A villain that you think had depth. Not just I'm bad, but a villain that had flaws, that had wants, that had goals that you felt something for, that you saw growing within the story. A villain that was written as a character and not just like a bad. Please tell me about a villain. I want to chat villains so badly. That's all I have for you. That's it. That was fun. Yeah. Comment down below if you have a villain that you want to talk to me about. Comment down below if you have a villain that you want to rant to me about. Comment down below if you have a series that disappointed you, a series that you're excited about, a series that you're in the middle of. Everybody who's reading The Cruel Prince with me right now, I've seen you. I've got the second and third books on the way. What you're not going to do is get in these comments and spoil The Cruel Prince for me. The way that I'll be at your front door. You can talk to me about every series, but don't you dare get in there and spoil The Cruel Prince. Everybody who's reading it with me, I have the books coming. The library was playing games. I hope you're reading good books. I hope that you're setting goals for yourself, or you're reflecting on what you've been reading. You're coming to the bottom of what's not making you happy and what's not satisfying you, and you're coming up with some solutions. If you want to go on this bit of an epic high fantasy journey with me, I will be, of course, I always tell you what I'm reading. You know I'm going to run my mouth. I'm going to tell you my business. That there are no boundaries here. There's going to be some TMI on this channel. I will be telling you. Quill Prince readers, I can't wait to keep going. Oh, I'm so excited that we're doing that one together because I'm having a great time. I'll talk to you guys next time.